please welcome Mr. David Schafer.
สวัสดีครับ Thank you to the Association of Siamese Architects for inviting me. Thank you guys for showing up. Please come on in. Don't be shy. Is there a clicker?
The clicker มีตัวคลิก
I guess I should put this on silent. We're going to keep things very casual today, so that one. Okay, thank you. Can I give you that?
มันยืด
Okay, so yeah, thanks for coming. Maybe some of you know a little bit about Studiomake already. I'll presume most of you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and run through some projects really quick. So I guess the format for today, what I want to do is I want to just kind of run through some projects really quick so you kind of understand the context of the studio, the way we work, those sorts of things. And then, kind of like the work, I want to just dive into the details. So we'll do some quick slides, and then I brought a bunch of objects. So I'm off the stage down here so that we can kind of have a conversation. So hopefully you guys have questions. Feel free to ask questions anytime. Raise your hands, interrupt, get up, stand around, look at things. Don't be shy. Okay, let's see. How am I going to do this with this? Okay. So Studiomake. Our studio can be a little bit hard to pin down in terms of who we are and what we do. Fundamentally, we're architects, so we're about the same core principles as most good architecture studios, right? We're affected by our context. We care deeply about space, about environment, about material and craft. But we are also slightly obsessed with the importance of touch within architecture, with the intimate scale of the built environment, with the role of the hand, not only in the experience of architecture, but especially within the production of architecture, so the hand and the creative process. And it's at this kind of intimate point of contact. Door handles are a favorite place of ours to dwell. Here at Yohani Plasma's handshake of the building, that we like to spend our time. And we really do think of our buildings less as a formal exercise and more of an orchestration of ideally cohesive collection of details. And as moments of deep consideration can only be experienced within the structure of spaces, I think the buildings require occupation, require an intimate scale of interaction. So I know I'm showing you zoomed out pictures, but you're welcome to visit anytime. And even here at our largest project, Guan Yin Pavillion, which is at Rangsit University, completed about 10 years ago now. Even at our largest projects, our most traditional architecture projects, we're very much focused on the details. In fact, we're working on a custom brick while we were still sorting out the program and the design. So that's our largest project. I don't know if we would ever go back to projects of that scale, but in a lot of ways the work or our process hasn't changed. And I don't think we would go back to that scale for a couple of reasons, but one, we're just too slow. Whether that's a strength or a weakness depends on who you ask. But I like to think that good work takes time. A correlation with depth and richness. A home takes a lifetime to build, right? So now a corporate interior should certainly be quicker, and we do interior work. But we discovered over time that more control allows our process to adapt while avoiding compromise. So usually we are in a kind of design build or design fabricate sort of process. And this expansion of scope, this expansion of control, comes with increased reward, but also increased risk. But somehow we're learning to continue to over-deliver on projects. Oops. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Lighthouse, roots. Okay. And I think the key for us, and one thing we're constantly working on, is this concept of a fast-track process and designing things that are, in a way, open-ended so that you can start certain aspects, start certain fabrication elements, and allow for a certain looseness and a certain organic process still. So these last 4 projects, all 4 of these projects on the screen were design, build, fabricate. So design meaning we did the design work, but build meaning we were acting as the contractor. And then fabricate meaning we made certain elements ourselves within the projects. Some of our work, though, doesn't even start with design at all. Increasingly, we collaborate with other designers, architects, and artists, and we focus solely on the details and the production. And even within that process, there's amazing opportunity for creativity and poetry, even if we're not doing the design work proper. There we go. So these 2 projects on the right were designed by Klein Dytham, Japanese architects, for Central World, and the details were resolved and fabricated by us. And, you know, these collaborations, true collaborations, are really, I think, an amazing opportunity to learn, to not only learn about the process and perspectives of others, but also ourselves and how we respond to those inputs and interactions. Again, let's see. There we go. So this is a display system called House Calls for an artist, Kunpinari Sanpitak. And she's been a lovely collaborator, client, ever since that project. And actually right now we have about 4 or 5, maybe even 6, it's hard to tell sometimes, projects with her. So again, they're collaborative in the sense that we're making the work that somebody else has conceptualized. But for us, really, the creativity flows equally. And actually, this might be a good point to kind of transition. You know, working with an artist has really helped me understand. Actually, the first kind of point of understanding for the difference between artists and architects really kind of hit me in the face when I arrived at graduate school in my early 30s. And I went to art school for graduate school. And it was there that I really started to understand kind of the core difference between artists, the way artists conceptualize and kind of the motives for their work versus architects at the other end of the spectrum. And I think this kind of understanding this spectrum, this kind of fluid shift between, or shifting back and forth between creativity and responsibility, I think is an important lesson and kind of foundation for our work. Because in some ways, some of our work doesn't really have any overt aesthetic requirements. So this project on the upper right, Modules for Roots, is really just about a technical solution for the Roots Coffee company that we've developing for them over the years. And we've designed this kind of complex modular system, counter system, that tightly integrates really super banal infrastructure. So we spent time designing our own grease traps and gray water pump systems. And honestly, that kind of work, although it sounds really gross and boring, is actually really interesting and engaging. And so all of that, you know, those grease traps, I feel like I'm just as proud of and are just as sexy as like our coolest kind of decorative objects. So, you know, maybe this is a good, can't get this button to work. There we go. So even though we kind of deep dive into these, you know, this idea of hardware and tooling and techniques and these industrial processes, it really is all in pursuit of an outcome that is as creative as possible. And so my premise has always been, and this is, you know, what we hold in our studio, and also what I try to teach, is that this technical knowledge, that my knowledge now of grease traps allows for increased creativity. Like the more technical knowledge you have, the kind of weirder you can get, really, the more rules you can break, if you know the rules. Okay, so to bring me back onto topic, there we go. All of these pursuits that I've shown before, I would claim to have an architectural process, even the grease traps. Maybe a process that's truly uniquely ours, but these shift in scales and scope don't really require a change of thought patterns. So it's not like, I put on my grease trap hat and then I put on my architecture hat. Like, I really do think of all of these projects as equivalencies, just kind of a change in scale and scope. They all relate, they all overlap, they all influence each other. This architectural screen here that we developed to help a client mitigate a bad view, an undesirable view from his penthouse, is a good example of this kind of systems-based fast-track process that I was talking about earlier. That's present with the root project. It's also present in a prefabricated house project that we're working on as well. But the idea is to develop this kind of well-designed framework for then creativity to happen within. And so this table here at the front contains prototypes and parts and pieces from this screen. So again, I know this is going to take a certain act of bravery, but I would encourage you guys to approach the table. Don't be shy. I mean, I'll kind of hold things up and stuff, but here's a little more of the context so you can kind of see this guy had an amazing view, and then they built a building in front of him. And so it's a really simple idea is to kind of, counteract the view a little bit, but not necessarily block the flow of space or the light that comes in. So the idea was to make something that is on one level transparent, but also kind of, hey, look at me instead of the bad view kind of thing. So this is it. I'll show kind of some details. You can see how it's assembled. Again, these are the prototype pieces up here. It's kind of an obsession with joints. So yeah, I guess you can see from here there's these metal infill elements. Actually, let me start. Maybe at this point we can kind of stop looking at the screen and start looking at the objects. We'll see how that goes. But these were the two conceptual models that we presented to the client. And so both are kind of equal in their approach of this idea of aggregating a series of boxes with some sort of feature element within. And so we presented two options. One was teak boxes with metal infill elements, and the other one was metal boxes with teak infill elements. And so we just presented these two different conceptual approaches and let the client choose. He chose the teak boxes, and so then we had to figure out what these metal infill elements were. And so within this early study model, we had done three different kind of metal pieces in there, different washers, things that I had in the studio that we just kind of plugged in there. And so as we started to then think about what those metal pieces were, we actually started to work on the boxes as well. So the boxes, maybe I should have taken that like wireless TED Talk. That was a poor choice thing. The boxes themselves hold these metal objects, but we made the boxes and started fabricating the boxes before we knew what was going to go inside. And so the joints, while in their installation or installed state, are fairly simple. They're actually quite complex. So this is actually the corner here, and this allows these aluminum pieces to then mount the brackets. Actually, I'm just going to trust you guys. You look trustworthy. I'm just going to send some parts around and assume that they'll come back. So those are kind of the different metal pieces that hold the panels inside. And so there's these different forks that kind of get clamped in. Just let you pass those around. And so, Yeah, I mean, we're kind of working on everything all at once kind of approach. And so with these metal infill pieces, so as we figured out the box and kind of put that into production, because we had a lot of little wood pieces to make, there was 299 boxes. I'm looking at Ice like she knows, she wasn't here for that, but there was a lot of boxes, and of course you multiply that times 4 times 2, that's a lot of little pieces of wood that we need to route, produce, sand, coat, all that stuff. And so we started thinking about the metal infill pieces. And I think the first thought we kind of had about a screen was actually this little sketch here. So this is just 2 pieces of perforated metal, right, to get that kind of classic moire pattern, right? When you get those 2 layers of perf, you get that kind of shimmering movement. And this was actually something we played with at one of our very first architecture projects at Rung State University as well, this idea of, you know, these 2 pattern layers, and then you get this kind of movement, the moire pattern. And so that was really the first piece we developed was this one here. And so we started looking at different ways of perforating. And our first idea was actually to laser cut. We just figured we'd laser cut 2 different layers. But the laser cutting cost was really expensive, right? So with laser cutting, it's kind of the same cost for one as it is 100 or 1,000, because you're paying for machine time. So that's really cool from a prototyping standpoint, but not great from a production standpoint. So while we were trying to figure out how we were going to be able to afford it, we kind of stumbled across CNC punching. And so that's kind of like a big industrial hole punch that just goes around and slams holes into metal. So laser cutting, you can make any shape you want. With punching, you need to use whatever shapes they have in stock, or pay a lot of money to have a new one made. So we started to look at different hole sizes. I'm not sure how in-depth to go on each thing. Well, I'll try to rush through and then really try to open up for questions, and I can dig into anything that anybody's interested in. So anyway, we made a lot of prototypes, a lot of different samples. So that was the punching, and that represents most of the infill pieces because they're kind of industrial produced. And then we had some other ones that were more special. So you can see the one on the right is cast aluminum, and that's this guy here. So this we cast out of aluminum, cast it at our studio. So bought some big ingots of aluminum, melted them down, and then cast them into sand, which is quite fun and kind of DIY. You can melt aluminum with like a ceramics kiln, so it's fairly achievable. And then the one to the left of center there is this one here. And this one is a laser-cut flat piece of steel that's been hammered. And so as you smash the metal over and over, it starts to get thinner in the middle, and then it starts to kind of dome. So that's where we get that kind of concave shape from that piece. And so that kind of concave shape became, in a way, a frame of reference, and that started to influence the other pieces. So that kind of influenced the shape of this piece that we cast. So we started kind of looking at that kind of shape and allowing kind of the production and the processes of each one to influence each other. So maybe I'll stop there. This table here is kind of a mix of things. So it's pieces from previous projects. So these were some of the first prototypes we did for the Roots project, which now that we had this kind of knowledge or experience with CNC punching, we knew that we could kind of utilize that for the Roots project. And so this punching allows for, actually not dissimilar to these welding tables here, allows for things to be attached and removed quite easily. And so for restaurant supply, or this kind of restaurant back of house use, it allows a lot of flexibility in how the pieces are used. And as well, you'll notice that if you go into the back of a restaurant, most of the stainless steel equipment is made out of round tube. And there's a good reason for that, and that is it's cleaner. So if the tube is closed, bugs can't hide out in it, right? And if you spill something, it doesn't collect, it doesn't rust, it doesn't rot. So because we were going to make this stuff ourselves, we knew that if we did square shapes, that holes in it would also allow for liquids to not get trapped. So if somebody spills milk, it doesn't just kind of sit, it flows through and can be cleaned. Also, it makes it harder for bugs and little critters to hide out. So the holes kind of have a dual purpose. So these were samples we did, kind of looking at density and different patterns. This is a jig for a project that we just finished for Kunpineri. So this object itself, this kind of weird, I don't know what it's supposed to look like or what you think it looks like, but it's just actually a jig for making something else. So the thing that this makes is actually just this. So just this really simple, clean kind of quarter circle. Let's see, other things on this table. These are a couple of boxes for, how do I explain this? Yeah, I know, but so a client that's doing like an NFT project with fish sauce. So NFT fish sauce. Google that. So they're boxes for fish sauce.
You store them in there? You store the fish, well,
the fish sauce,
NFT. Yeah.
It gets delivered in this.
Oh,
the
like a
fish
packaging?
Sauce, yeah, it's basically...
And a display.
Yeah, it's nice.
Because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, nobody would want to throw that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of not throwing things out, over here in this part of the table here are a bunch of coins. So these little pieces are coins that we did for a bar called Opium Bar, which is a very nice bar. I recommend you check it out. And these are kind of their like VIP and kind of what's the word? Yeah, VIP program. So you show up, you buy a couple drinks, they give you a coin, and you take it, you can redeem it, stuff like that. But they wanted to have something that felt nice, didn't feel cheap, but in a way was cheap. So they could freely give them out as kind of mementos, but still had enough kind of importance and quality that people wouldn't throw them out. Right? So
what
everybody
is the material?
In the end, we did laser cut stainless steel for the regular kind of coin, and then there's a VIP, well, VVIP coin that is leather and brass with a RFID chip inside, so it opens a locker. So that's this one here. Don't steal this. Yeah, so that was about this kind of memento that had this really nice, just felt nice to touch, felt nice in your pocket, was something you wanted to keep, and then having this kind of physical connection to this place. So that's what that coin was about. These little models here, these 3 models were 3 separate schemes for a house that's under construction soon. So these are the 3 conceptual models that we presented to the client, and it's more or less in kind of design development phase, but similar to, like I said, our fast track process, we are starting work on the structural steel. So for the structural steel, we're making our own structural sections. So this is the floor beam. It's this kind of Z shape, and then I'm going to... And then the roof beam is this angle. And so the roof, when the modules stack, actually I should mention it's prefabricated and modular. So when the floor of the roof of the first floor meets the floor of the second floor, it kind of interacts like that. If that makes sense.
What's the floor structure made out of? That will be held by those
So these are the beams. It's if you look at the model, actually, the model is made up of these little cubes of wood.
Right.
And so it's this kind of modular system, 3 meter by 3.2 meter module that then gets stacked up. So we'll make each of these modules individually and then stack them up. So these are kind of the perimeter beams of one of those modules.
So you built, is it like a prefab boxes, cubes that will be brought on site and will be resting on these pieces?
Those pieces are kind of the structure of that prefab cube.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we've, I can't remember actually the first project. Actually, it was another house project that wasn't fully design build. We were architects, and then we were the steel fabricator for a house project that we did.
Right.
So in the process of trying to sort out the steel structure for that house, we found a factory in Samut Prakan that can laser cut and bend 6-meter pieces of steel.
Wow.
So that's a big fucking machine.
Right. And how thick is the steel?
It can bend up to 15 millimeters thick.
15 millimeters.
Yeah. So this is 10 here.
Wow.
So yeah, they can bend 6-meter pieces of 10 millimeter steel.
Wow.
You get quite a big radius, of course, but the radius I think is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions? Again, feel free to come up and look at the objects. Where's the stuff I passed around, by the way? Let's see if it comes back. Oh, there we go. Look at you guys, so honest. Thank you, sir.
I have the first question, David.
Yeah.
I'm quite intrigued and interested by the screen project here. As part of the, like, I imagine, okay, you presented 2 options to your clients, right? One is the teak option and the other one is the white one. Do they give you any specific brief, or they just said, I would like a screen that I don't want to see this humongous building next to me?
Yeah, this particular client is, I don't know how to describe him, but he's almost a little bit more like a, not a benefactor. What's the word for somebody that kind of hires an artist? There's a word. Yeah.
Art dealer?
Not an art dealer. He basically, the design brief was, fix this problem with my view.
I see.
So it was very open.
Right.
And he's not at all specific in terms of material, and gives us a lot of leeway.
Yeah, exactly.
So he kind of, it's really up to us to kind of interpret the problem.
And propose to him. Right, because most clients, they would say, this is what I need, this is the time frame that I have, and this is the budget that you can play around with.
Right.
Which a lot of times it would limit, our creativity or put certain conditions. But it seems like with this project you can...
Yeah, although that being said, so that this project didn't have a budget, didn't really have a time frame.
Okay.
And so, when we presented 2 options, the metal option was cheaper and the teak option was really expensive, and he easily chose the expensive option because he just preferred the wood.
Yeah.
So money and time wasn't an issue.
Right.
However, not all of our work is that way. And any time somebody approaches us, whether it's another designer or an artist or an architect, it's actually really helpful for me creatively to understand the budget and understand the time that's available.
Project as a whole. Right.
And then it helps me narrow down really quickly on the technique, the process that I then am going to be creative within.
Exactly.
So
right. Right, and with this project or with your other projects, it seems like you are very intrigued and interested in detailing and details of how things are made and produced. Is it very important to you that you need to visit the space that the objects will be placed to study the language there, or it's more about the process of what you would like to produce?
I mean, I think it just depends on the particular project, I think, or the needs of that project. So for the screen project, we needed to go and see it before we even had any ideas.
Right.
Of the space and see the view and understand the issue.
Yep.
And that's part of what led to this modular system, is thinking that we might need to adjust once we got on site. And that's why in those early pictures, it's kind of masked to the left and then opens up to the right because the view opens up to the right. So,
right.
So the design is responding to that. But in a way, the system is also universal. We did have a client come to us a year or two later asking for an architectural screen. And it was an interior space. So it was dividing two interior spaces, and we proposed this.
I see.
So in a way, it's specific but universal at the same time. I think.
Exactly.
So.
And is the modular design, is it something intended from the beginning because you need to transport it?
Yeah, I mean, we just thought that's for us too. We're not great at site work. So
you really would prefer to produce and make things in your lab and then bring it on site.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. And I imagine that once you stack these together, you would be nervous that they're going to stand well, or you would test them.
We did some tests early on. Yeah, I mean, they all bolt together and then it bolts to the ground. And,
I see.
There is a couple brace points at the roof,
at the top,
the ceiling as well.
Okay.
So, but it's not, it's not meant to climb on. That's for sure. So it supports itself. It's fine.
It is safe.
It's safe. But we, like you saw in the presentation, we do. Have done play structures for kids in the past, and so that tends to be much more overbuilt.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. What you said earlier about you went to the graduate school, which is an art school.
Correct.
I imagine the undergrad you did architecture.
Correct.
And you said that you somehow find the connection, or somehow art world and the architecture world speaks to you. I would like to understand more. What do you think both have in common, and what do you think both have the most largest difference?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the thing that's in common, I would say both are trying to do something good. I mean, I know that sounds like a dumb answer, but I think understanding that as an architect, like my kind of core form of expression and what I can bring to the table is fundamentally different than an artist. An artist is very much, and again, I'm making huge generalizations here, but I found that the artists are generally about what their personal view is, right? And so when it's about somebody's personal view, you can't really question the outcome because this is what they want and this is their read on a situation. But as architects, we're taught to be, it's not about me, it's about it's not about what I want, it's about what the project wants. And so, it's a bit of a semantic distinction. It's like when you're in school and you're presenting, I did have a John that would say, I don't care what you want. What does the client want? What does the user want? So so you would have to rephrase the way you stated, why you did the thing you did.
Exactly.
But I do think that distinction ends up kind of affecting and carrying through on the work. So in other words, even though I might do things that are considered artistic, I don't fundamentally see anything I've ever made as art. And because it's in some ways it's not about those kind of bigger topics. I'm not trying to change people's opinions. I'm really just trying to solve a problem in the most
and what the project asks for
possible. Yes,
and I really like that because when you say what the project asks for, it takes in consideration of the designer, the client, the producer, the maker, and the team members.
Yeah, I mean, it is a double-edged sword, though, because sometimes, we'll do what we think is best for the project at the financial detriment of the studio, and maybe at the detriment of the client's timeline. So sometimes we won't compromise because I think that's the best thing for the project, even if it costs us money and pisses off the client. I'm convinced in the end they will benefit
yes,
long term.
And because you believe that the challenge, the open-ended challenge would be much more beneficial, right? So it's risky.
Right.
So...
Do you want to see if any... Well, actually, it looks like my staff is kind of jumping in there. Everybody's ignoring us.
Let's just be a DJ and Oh, well, I have some question here.
Yeah, does anybody have questions for us?
Figure out the very middle part that's actually connecting the edges.
So that is...
One piece is two pieces.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come off.
There's four of these. There's four of those. So one bracket. So there's one bracket underneath.
Yes.
And then there would be one bracket. Yeah.
I see. They come out a little bit.
Yeah.
To connect them together.
They're not sitting on.
No, they float. There's a gap.
And the force is going on the wheel,
on the hinge.
screw, right?
The force is, it's
going on screw
on those two
right?
screws, correct.
Yeah, I was wondering about one piece only. It was not possible to do one piece.
Right.
We were looking for
Right.
something like this, that you avoid to have the transfer of weight on these two elements.
Yeah.
It's kind of maybe it depends on the quality of the screw you have.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's kind of low enough weight that it's...
This one is extremely solid compared to the
Correct. A lot of times we're sizing stuff more about, so this is 5 millimeters because I wanted a 5 millimeter gap. And I wanted to hide the head of the screw here. So its thickness is not about strength. It's about functionality of other things. So it's about hiding the screw. It's about having this big gap here so that these two pieces don't have to be perfectly parallel.
I'm going to give you an empty Kevin.
Yeah. Kevin was,
So normally when you make prototypes, like let's say for this project here, the client chose the teak option, and then do you study the scale of how big the modules would be based on the weight of it, or the aesthetic, or...
the modules, the size kind of became about, it's just, like that. Yeah. The size became about kind of what's easy to handle, kind of efficiency of material, making sure that these things in the middle weren't too big.
Right.
But then, of course, the smaller the pieces, the more joints you have.
Yes.
So in a way, if it's bigger, it's actually more economical. So it's really just kind of
a balance.
About, balancing the numbers.
And the choice of the aluminum over other metal, is it because of the weight or its property that you're able to kind of play more with it?
That's a good question. I think it kind of came... I don't remember, honestly. It kind of just develops, and it became, like I said, in the model there we just used two washers in these balls that we had to kind of just represent different things, but then it just became about these using aluminum in three different ways. So kind of punching it, hammering it, and casting it. And the aluminum just allowed a lot of flexibility with that, so it takes the hammering really, really easily, so a lot of expression. And then aluminum is kind of the most serious metal that we can melt and cast. Yes. So if we were going to do iron, that's a whole nother level of temperature and requirements. So, and I'd done some aluminum casting before. And so I was kind of comfortable with it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I personally, I didn't know you can cast your own aluminum. And since you said that you could do it in the kiln, I might try at home.
Yeah. And you can, with aluminum too, you can make a crucible out of steel. So it melts at a lower temperature than steel. So the steel will get red hot, but it won't melt. So
right.
It's just a little easier all around.
Yes. Wow. That's very interesting. And I have some more questions about the houses, because moving from, the modular scale, which is a small scale of being a screen, to a house, do you find that you run or use the same process, whether the object is a small scale and it's a big house.
I mean, we really do. Like, I think, this idea of a prefabricated house is something that we've been working up, kind of like trying to come at from different directions for many, many years.
Right.
And right before COVID, we had a project with MQDC actually to develop a prefabricated modular architectural element system to help easily modify shop houses. So
interior or the exterior?
Interior and exterior, but and as a giant developer, you might kind of think like, what does this have to do with?
Exactly.
But it's interesting because it benefits directly their developments, because in the downtown area, right, you'll get a huge development.
Right.
But then you'll have some owners of these shop houses that don't want to sell.
Exactly.
Right, and so those shop houses are immediately adjacent to these huge developments.
Right.
So they're motivated to try to bring up the level of that kind of retail and commercial stock. So they want to make an easy way for those owners to upgrade, to build, because sometimes those owners, they're not always kind of like the crusty old man who never wants to sell. They just want to benefit. They think, okay, great, there's going to be a condo here.
Right.
This will be good for my noodle shop. But then it's kind of like, well, what about the other 4 stories above?
Exactly.
And so they saw it as a way of kind of breathing life into this infrastructure that was immediately around their developments. And as well as these developers go, when they do come into an area, they will have somebody who wants to sell a shop house.
Yeah, right.
And so they'll buy them with the idea that, okay, well, maybe someday we can have an exit through here, we can scrape them all, but they own a large amount of shop houses all over the city.
Right.
1 here, 2 there, 3 in a row, 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And so they saw this project as a way for them to better utilize real estate that they're just kind of sitting on.
Right.
So, again, prior to that, we had been thinking about a prefabricated house and for another client. And so, again, we just kind of shifted gears towards that project. So that project died because of COVID. And then shortly after that,
the knowledge stays.
The knowledge stays. And then the Roots project came in.
Right.
And, once we started talking with the client about, okay, well, they wanted a lot of flexibility in opening and closing their restaurants or their coffee locations.
Right.
So they just wanted a really flexible system. With most kind of restaurant supply stuff, it's custom made, and then when you move, you throw out 80% of it.
Right.
So they wanted something that was modular, something that was removable, something that could, add or subtract, expand, contract. And so in a way, the design brief was almost exactly like the MQDC project, just at a different scale.
Right.
And so a lot of the ideas, even some of the diagrams we used in developing the Roots system. And so the Roots project, in a way, is like a miniature building. We've got infrastructure, we've got electrical, we've got plumbing that we need to, chase and bring around.
Right.
And so that, in a way, is directly even kind of coming back to this house project. It's like just the same mentality, it's just different scale.
I see. So it means that many of your clients, when they approach you, they wouldn't already understood that what materials you're comfortable to work with and what your design process is?
I mean, I guess I would say that clients, we seem to only get the weird clients.
The unique ones that
Are there any clients here? No, they would fully embrace that. I mean, we don't. I guess we're not. We're not good at the standard kind of stuff. Like that takes a talent and a skill to do a house quickly and confidently in a kind of a normal way. And we just don't get normal clients because I can't offer a normal product. Sometimes I wish I could, but so we get people that have a weird problem to solve. It's usually like a blend of something technical with a desired positive aesthetic outcome.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I guess we generally we just get weird projects.
I see. which turns out to be very interesting
Yeah.
and unique results.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the more weird projects you do, the more weird clients you get. So it's great. It's perfect.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about within the studio? Do you kind of start off, like figuring out problem solving or coming up with design, starting with the sketches, or do you kind of just go to the materials and start playing around with it?
It totally depends. There's not a clean answer for that. Like sometimes there's a sketch. I think pretty fluidly in AutoCAD. I've been just using it for so long that I'm not fully comfortable with sketching.
All right.
So I do sketch in order to kind of get ideas out, or if I'm stuck somewhere. But really, I don't feel like I can fully understand a problem until I can kind of see it to scale and start.
2D AutoCAD or 3D?
2D AutoCAD.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean we're in the studio. We're trying to transition to parametric modeling, specifically Fusion 360.
Right.
Because we do so much industrial stuff, and so we have a couple seats of that, and some of our staff uses it. But I'm not that comfortable with it yet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I understood that you have been teaching, or you were teaching at the university level. How do you find your students that are Thai students have interest in what you do, and how curious they are, as opposed to, because everywhere they go, when they think of architecture, it would be like buildings, and not so much of exploring in terms of the detailing and smaller objects.
To me, that's a very interesting topic. I think that where do I start with this? When I first moved here with my partner and my wife at the time, to start this practice, we didn't really anticipate how difficult it would be to find staff, to find students and graduates and designers that are really engaged in this kind of way of thinking and doing things. And it took a long time to really understand, through years of teaching and kind of trying to unpack and understand this. I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's not a problem. It's just kind of the condition. And I realize it's a couple things. I think what it comes down to is material and labor. Right? The cost of labor versus the cost of material. And because Thailand has a very affordable labor pool and labor rate, it's not really necessary to be very DIY. So I don't think most Thai kids that are in the socioeconomic strata of college, college architecture, college and architectural professions, they don't necessarily have a childhood that's hands-on. And so in Thailand versus I think in what I've observed in the States, in Thailand, architecture is seen as a very, as I say, white-collar profession. Right? It's seen as a kind of like, and I'm not at all trying to be disparaging to any Thai students, but it's seen as generally like, like a button-up shirt, kind of like, iPad sketching, kind of, BMW driving kind of profession. Like that's the way it is. Whereas in the States, it tends to kind of maybe attract the more gritty kids, which is me, honestly. Like I grew up like, with my dad always fixing things. Because in the States, you really just can't hire somebody to fix things. So I just kind of grew up around tools and being hands-on. And
do it yourself. When there's a problem, you solve it yourself.
Yeah, and so I think that kind of that experience and that upbringing just really kind of saturates and permeates the way I see architecture. And I also think that it's fair to say that maybe it has to do with the era that I was brought up in. Right.
I'm not going to ask how old you are.
Oh, I'm happy to share that. But when I came into architecture school, now I was learning AutoCAD, but that was very like groundbreaking at the time. I don't even know what version it was, but or what it is right now. But I think things were just much more analog. And so my first couple years of architecture school was about renderings, was drawing things by hand. And I suck at drawing. It's just a simple fact. So I would make nice models to compensate for the fact that I was not good at hand drawing. Because I was interested in architecture from kind of like a hands-on point of view, not from like an artist, kind of like, oh, I'm good at drawing, I'm going to be an architect.
So model becomes your communication tool.
So model became the main communication tool. So as you progress in architecture and the stakes get higher, architecture school, the models have to get better and better. So I just spent more and more time in the model shop making nicer and nicer models and becoming comfortable around the table saw, all the woodworking tools and stuff like that. So and then eventually to my architecture thesis project, it was basically a piece of furniture that I made myself and learned a lot of painful lessons that I still learn, continue to relearn today. So a lot of the stuff that I, experienced and kind of bring to the table literally here is just kind of from my childhood in a way.
Right.
And I just think it's just a slightly different type of kid that gets into architecture school.
Right. So it means that, coming from your background, more hands-on experience. Therefore, when you came to Thailand and you have to find staff, right, and the architecture students would have different mentality because they were brought up differently because you pay people to make things for you and not making it yourself. So therefore, as a lecturer at the university, do you think that when you explain to them that how things are made, because your products are based on the process of making, do you think they able to understand? And
Absolutely. It's not a matter of like, intelligence or Western education versus, Thai education. I don't think it's any of that. I think it's just kind of the focus and kind of the context. It just shifts it slightly away from being hands-on.
Right.
And so that knowledge isn't necessarily there. So when I did teach, one of the classes I taught was basically making for designers. So I have a lecture that I give on screws. So I talk about screws for literally 3 hours. And it's like, understanding different types of screws and how they get used is an important part of making things that get bolted together. And, knowing the different types of welding and all that kind of technical stuff, like I said, to me, it's empowering creatively.
Creativity, yeah.
So if you don't know how things are made and what types of wood there are and how those pieces of wood can be cut, you're left as a designer to making a formal contribution. You can control and suggest a form, and in the end, somebody else needs to figure out how to make that form. And chances are it's going to fall short. So in a lot of ways, it's also about control, wanting to get the things that I want. But I do think that Thai kids understand it. They get it. They appreciate it. It's just, again, not kind of part of, just not as integral into the education, I think.
Right. And so when you recruit the staff, the Thai kids that come to your office, and now they have to start making things, are they comfortable or are they a bit scared? Or
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I do think that, since I've gotten here over the last 15 years, I do think that there's this kind of resurgence and interest in like craft culture, and so I do think that that's getting
the timing as well.
The timing is good, but I've had students, I've had people interview and say, "Oh, why do you want to work for me?" "Oh, I'm interested in craft." "Cool, okay," and then they quit after 2 days.
Once they can spell the word craft.
This is not craft. They want like, carving wood and smoking cigarettes and listening to jazz. So I've started to say like, this is industrial craft. But yeah, I mean, I think it takes time. I think that's another kind of, let's say, topic within the kind of Thai student, Thai employee kind of spectrum is that, a lot of Thai employees are more interested or more inclined for a quicker turnover. Oh, I've been there for a year. I'm going to try something else. You really can't, with this way of working, you can't learn shit in a year. So it takes time.
It would be more like an apprenticeship that it kind of you have to keep developing and learning as you go.
I mean, I think the other thing that I try to like emphasize is it never stops. I never get it right. Like I know a lot, but I don't know everything, and I still make mistakes, and we get stuff wrong, and like it's constantly learning. Like you will never master making, right? Like, it's impossible. So so yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge to find team members that like that, that are interested in being hands-on, in temperatures like this, are not afraid to go outside and sweat, are willing to put in the time to kind of get that hard-earned empirical knowledge, something you learn like yourself firsthand.
Right.
So that's difficult for us. It's actually the biggest challenge of the studio.
Right.
Honestly. And you asked earlier about clients. All of the marketing we do, which is pretty much not any, but all of the marketing we do is designed to find employees, not to find clients. I don't have a problem with, I got too many clients, but not enough. There's never enough team members.
Right.
And so that's in a way like the challenge for us is building the team.
So hopefully today, it's your good chance. Do you want to market yourself?
Well, we're always hiring. I mean, the team we have is amazing. I'm not, and to be clear, this is no way like I'm not saying it's a problem. It's just a scarcity. It's just hard to find, that good fit.
Right, exactly.
So it's a big topic. It's definitely a big topic for the studio.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Cool. But I'm sure that more and more people will be interested since you've been, showing objects here that are beautiful.
What's that? Oh, yeah. We'll wheel the stuff off to the site off to the side, and people can come check it out
and
more.
See more? Yeah. Right. Okay, I think we are approaching the time, but I'm not sure if
anyone... Are there any questions?
Have any questions?
We've been talking to each other this whole time.
I know. I am the audience as well as the moderator.
Yeah.
Right.
Any questions from the audience? Maybe we covered it all?
I think so.